Selamat pagi, a very good morning to all of you. First, let me take this opportunity to wish all my Muslim friends and colleagues Selamat Bulan Ramadan as it has just started. So this morning, we are very pleased to actually host Seng Keat from the Merdeka Centre of Opinion Research to present to us the findings of a research survey that Merdeka Centre does on an annual basis on the perceptions towards liberalism in Malaysia. So why is Ideas interested in this topic? I think the foundations and the philosophical underpinnings of liberalism are quite widely, I would say, differently understood, not just misunderstood, but differently understood across the different sectors of the Malaysian society. And I think the survey findings will show and reveal very interesting trends as well over the last few years. Of course, we at Ideas believe in the philosophy of our the independence, which therefore founded the country on the ideals and principles of the founding fathers of Malaysia. And in fact, our vision is very premised and aligned with the first Prime Minister of Malaysia, Tunku Abdul Rahman, on the underpinnings of liberty and justice. So when we look at the terms liberty and justice, what do they really mean? And these are very high, perhaps intellectual phrases that not many amongst the common Malaysians may be able to identify with. So I think I will save my remarks for the later session because I'm also one of the discussants, and I will don't want to reveal about the survey too much because that's something that my colleague is going to be presenting on. But I just want to take this opportunity to say that Ideas would like to provide a safe and rational space for discussion and rational discourse. The term liberalism can sometimes ignite a lot of public discussion, but I do think that this is the right time to think about it. What does the term really mean? I think sometimes also we are caught in the linguistic battles and the debates that take place far away from our shores. So the debates that take place in the United States and beyond. But what does this really mean for Malaysia? What does this really mean for our society and for our culture? So I'm very much looking forward to the presentation, and I would also like to thank in advance YB Amin Ahmad, a Member of Parliament for Kangar, as well as Encik Faisal Aziz, President of ABIM, for being with us here today. Thank you for sharing your thoughts in advance, and I look forward to discussing with you later. So I'm going to keep my comments short. I just thank you for joining us on this Thursday morning, and over back to you, Salsabila.
Thank you, Tricia. So before we move forward, I would like to lay down the tentative for today. So we will have a 20 minutes presentation by Seng Keat, Senior Manager of the Merdeka Centre of Opinion and Research, on the findings of the survey on Malaysia's perception towards liberalism. And then we will have the panel discussion with our speakers, Tricia Yo, YB Amin Ahmad, and also Saudara Faisal Aziz. I will be moderator for the session. And at the end of the discussion, we will have the Q&A session for 30 minutes. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. We will get back to you. I would like to introduce our speaker. He is Mr. Seng Keat, the Senior Manager of the Merdeka Centre of Opinion and Research, which is the first private polling firm in Malaysia in Merdeka Centre. So besides focusing on Malaysia, he also works across the Southeast Asia region for training and research, including Myanmar, Thailand, and Indonesia, Singapore, and also Philippines. So before Merdeka Centre, he involved in various projects with donor agencies, Malaysia government agencies. So he also has a stint in market research and consulting with exposure of Asia Pacific market. So without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to Mr. Seng Keat to proceed with his presentation. So please welcome.
Hi, good morning to everyone. So my name is Seng Keat. So as the moderator mentioned, I work for Merdeka Centre for about 10 years. So this would be our, I think this is the fifth wave of our survey on the liberalism, which tracking back to since 2016. So without further ado, I will just continue with my presentations. Then we give you a big background about this study. At the same time, we can discuss about the findings together with the panelists later. Hold on. Okay, just a quick update. So actually, we started these surveys back in 2016 with the support of the German foundations. So we try to understand how Malaysians understand about liberalism. So we break into this thing into three major categories: politics, economic, and social. So in general, it's the low understandings about the liberalism and also very divides across the community. Muslim and non-Muslim have a very different view about liberalism. We can further discuss later on. But on the political segment of the findings, generally is overwhelming, is positive, except for one thing that although people support for media freedom of expression, but they also at the same time they want Sedition Acts to be in place. But then the more contentious one will be on the social liberalism, where we will discuss later. And last, on the economic liberalism, which maybe a touch Tricia concerns as ideas, is Malaysians are very much into the big government concepts, kind of very protectionist compared to the free market things. So I will go into the detail. I will go into the detailed findings now. Okay, the 2000 study we conducted in December 11 to 12. So it covers 12,000 sample size across the country. So this is our typical methodology slide. We will describe all the detail, who is the respondent, demographic, age group, religions, income, occupation, and so on. But this year is slightly different from the previous year, 2016 to 2019, where before that, we only cover 21 years old voters only. But because we anticipate the Undi 18 will come before, so we adjust the sampling. We will include 18 years old adults Malaysians. So it still cover 1,200 sample size, but we just give you a update on the methodology. Is slightly different from the previous wave because that's only voters. Now we cover 18 and above. Okay. So first question we ask the respondent is, do they heard about the liberalism? Yes and no. So over the year, people, half, 50% of people say yes, they have not heard about it. Half of the people say don't know. The only outlier is happened in 2018, when we conduct the survey and just smack into the ICET rally be organized by the opposition then PAS and UMNO to anti the Malaysia endorsement of the ICET. So that also have impacts on our study where suddenly a lot of people talk about liberalism and all these things. But it doesn't mean that it's a positive thing, which I will show you later in our finding research. Yes, more awareness about liberalism, but at the same time, it will bring more negative views about liberalism. So is it people understanding the liberalism in the same way as everyone's? So probably it's not. So it very divides by the society. So here's just some of the detailed breakdowns about some of these demographics, what they heard about liberalism. So we can see that the Sabah Sarawak's respondents and also the Indians, they are less not exposed to the liberalism term. But we can, if let's say we go into the demographic, young people aged 18 to 30 years old, 58% say that they heard about that. But if they know about liberalism doesn't mean that it's a positive thing. So we shall also describe later on. So then next question, although half of the people say they know about liberalism, but we also ask, do they understand what it means? 2016, when we start the survey, 23% say, yeah, they understand. And up to today, only 22. The only outlier also, again, is 2018, when during the ICET ready, suddenly people say, oh, I know about ICET. Whether is how they view about ICET, that's a different thing. So you can see that we also ask what they know about liberalism. This is open-ended where we try to recruit. Then you can see that 22% of respondents say, oh, it's about freedom of speech, freedom of expressions. Some people are talking about general freedoms, 16%. 5% of people say the open-minded. Then you hear starting, bad doctrine is a bad idea, 4%. Then again, you can see that freedom of religion, freedom of thought, 4%, freedom of choice, freedom, the ideology itself is against Islam. Again, you can see the negative connotations about the terms. Then we have people say about fair and equitable society. But then again, you can see that it's very polarized amongst Muslim and non-Muslim. Take an example like, oh, okay, it's a bad doctrine. It's 90% is the response is from 90% is from the Muslim respondent and 80% from the young people for 40 and below. So then its ideas against Islam is 3%. Again, 100% the respondents, 100% is from the Muslims respondents. So there's also younger generations who have this kind of view. So then we ask, is realism good or bad for Malaysia? So when we started the survey in 2016, half of the respondents don't answer. They cannot say it's good or bad. Only 30% say, yeah, it's good for Malaysia. 22% say no. But over the year, you can see that starting 2018 again, the negative is more than the positive. Then again, up to last year, 2020, the survey we conduct, 37% say yes, it's good for Malaysia. 42 say no. So then you can see the polarization again here, where the Malay or Muslim respondent is overwhelming negative, say bad idea, but non-Malay, non-Muslim will say, or 2/3 of non-Muslim will say there's a good idea. But again, you look at the age group, it's not the young people who are say is positive, but it's the young people that actually say represent is the bad idea. So today, later, we have our rep chairman from ABIM, so we can further discuss on some of these phenomena. Then we go into detail, what's the good, what's the bad. So again, you can see that the good concepts, 37% of people say more freedom, freedom in general, freedom in expression, people live in harmony and so on. But when people say it's a bad concept, mostly it's related to religion, to Islam. 6% say generally it's a bad concept. 6% say it's about too much of freedom, and 6% say it's a good, not good thing, not good for Malaysia, not good for the multiracial country like us, and 4% people say it chaotic, we cannot control. So this is how Malaysians understand liberalism. So 37 say it's a good, 42 say it's a bad concept. So it's mostly colored by the religion background. Okay, now next is talking about political liberalism. We have 4 pillars here. Generally, is overwhelming positive. You can see the blue line, always more than 70, 80, almost 80%. First on the free and fair elections, on the top left corner, 85% say, it's a good thing. Free and fair election is a bad form of government for Malaysia. Then on the right top channel, 93% talk about rule of law, say positive, yes, a good thing. Then we also ask about freedom of speech and freedom of media. 79% say it's a positive thing. They agree the concept. But when we come to these seditions to guarantee peace and stability in Malaysia, then you can see a very contradictory response. 83% say, yeah, we need seditions, keep the Sedition Act so that we can keep the stability and peace in the country. At the same time, 79% say, Malaysia is ready for freedom of speech and free media. But on the contrast side, 83% say, yeah, we need Sedition Acts to manage the society. So this is something that very contradicting on this political pillar. So I don't go into detail, but I just show this slide. We asked the question whether the government should keep the Sedition Acts. Is overwhelming. Malay, Chinese, Sabahan, Sarakians, everyone say that government should keep the sedition. Again, the younger respondent, 86% say government should keep the sedition. So unlike the older generation, where it's only 76. So this also some generations divides. Next one is the more contentious one will be the social liberalism, which although is on the positive territory, but it divides along the community line. First, we ask whether we have a freedom to choose to live my life, whether, for example, my religion, whether my private sexuality, and also private method. 59% say positive, 35% say that they don't agree with that concept. But again, it's divide according to the community line. Then whether I have the right to impose my way of life on others, I accept the way of other live, where you can also, again, you see a very divides according to community line. Generally 54 say agree, 38 say no. Then, but later I will show the detail. The freedom should be limited by responding not harm other people. This one is about the violence and things. 70. Then the more general agreement, 78% agrees and 16% didn't agree. And then we asked the last pillar for the social realism is the government should control all citizens to protect the culture. Then you can see overwhelming 80% the people agree on this. Governments they prefer the government have some intervention about so that to protect the culture, values, and of the tradition of the society. Okay, next I goes to the first pillar, whether I can freely to choose my way of life, including sexuality, private matters. You can see a very divides according to the community. 37 of the Malay agree, 2/3 of Malay, 57 of Malays disagree, where the other community will be more positive. The Chinese and Indian overwhelming agree on this concept. But then on the Bumiputra, Sabahan, and Sarawak, and for the Sabah Sarawak, then the more divide, half-half kind of things. Then whether I have the right, I have no right to impose my way of life. It means whether certain religion group or certain ethnic group have need to impose their way of life on the minority. Then we can see a very different thing where the Malay only 31 say agree, 60% don't agree. But again, you can see the overwhelming response for the non-Malay, Chinese, and Indians. They agree on this. I don't want to impose my values on other people. Then also 50-50 splits in the Sabah and Sarawak respondents. So then I go to next is about this. The last part of this presentation is about the economics. We have 3 pillars here. First, we ask about whether the government involvement in the business. So we have 2 statements here, ask the respondent to choose. First, we ask the government should be involved in economy, where the GLC, a lot more GLC is good, they help the economy. The second statement on the red bar actually is a open economy like Malaysia should not, the government should not get involved, and so that it will create fair competitions and opportunity to everyone. Then you can see that we are more from year 2016, we are slightly more inclined to the open market, 49%, versus the big governments, 40%. Then over the year, we are moving more into the protectional kind of things, and this is across every groups, and also divides among the community. You can see that Malay Bumiputra will be more prefer government involvement with the GLC, but the non-Malay, Chinese, and Indians then will be prefer that the government GLC don't involve so much in the private sector, so that to have a more competitions there. Then again, the next pillar we ask about the economic liberalism. We ask about whether the government should control the price, goods, and also provide subsidy. Then you got very protectionist views about the Malaysian. 60% in the year 2000, 60% of the people think that the government should control trade, domestic and international, to give subsidy to Malaysian producers and help their business. The statement 2, the red bar, is we should uphold the free trade without subsidy, so that make Malaysia competitive in the long run. So we got only 26% people agree on that, and it's a decline from the 37 when we started the survey in 2016. So over the last few years, we all know that Malaysia in the long negotiation on the free trades, and also whether we are in or out, then also we also experience side effects on the US and China trade war. So is it the reason why we make Malaysians be slightly more towards the protectional view? Or maybe we can discuss with Trisha and YB Amin later. So, but then this one, you can see that there's no clear community divides. The Bumiputra, 2/3, they want the government control the price and subsidies, where the non-Malay, Chinese, and Indians are split half-half, but slightly more, also still, the more people prefer the subsidy over the free market. Then the last pillar we asked about the economics is about whether the government should help the poor and needy, and overwhelming 94% people say The government should need to help the poor without in respect the race and also the religion. So there's no clear divide. Everyone say, yeah, government should do that, but is it the detail? How people interpret the policy, that will be as another debate. Okay, this is just my short presentation. Is have a lot of things to argue and debate. So this only my presentation. We can listen to the panelists, then we can further discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tan Seng Keat, for the presentation. So it's a very good one. We can see that it's very interesting when Tan Seng Keat basically pointed out that Sabah and Sarawak Indian, they doesn't know what liberalism is, and even if they know, do they really understand what is the concept of liberalism? And it is really interesting to also look at the point of religion. When we look at Muslims, 90% didn't agree with liberalism. They accept it as a bad doctrine, and 10% think that it is not a bad doctrine.
Okay, I think there's something wrong with our moderator's internet connection. So I'm going to take over from here. I think I will just jump straight into my comments. I hope that everyone can hear me and my internet connection is smooth. So yes, I will carry on. Okay, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Okay, Salsabila, do you want to finish your comments?
Yeah, already finished. I'm sorry, I think it's because of the Wi-Fi here. Did I just left the chat? Okay, so I will introduce the speakers. Okay, I will introduce the speakers. So we have here, of course, our beloved Ms. Trisha Yeo, CEO of IDEAS, Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs, an independent public policy think tank in Malaysia. So she previously held positions of the Chief Operating Officer from 2013 until 2017, and also a fellow from 2017 until 2020. So she is also a PhD candidate at the School of Politics, History and International Relations, University of Nottingham, Malaysia campus, examining federal-state relations and opposition subnational durability within dominant party authoritarian regimes. Okay, we also have here with us YB Amin Ahmad, a member of Parliament of Kangar. He is also one of the coordinators in Merdeka Centre for Opinion and Research for the research project in Islamic religions and democracy in Malaysia. So we will have more comments on him about Muslims. I think it's very interesting. He is also the communication officer for Menteri Besar Selangor, manager in the Reformation Centre, a think tank institution that was founded by Yang Berhormat Anwar Ibrahim. And lastly, founded his own think tank, which is known as the Institute Kajian Kepimpinan dan Pembangunan LEAD, LEAD. And for our third speaker, we have Muhammad Faisal Aziz, which is the president of Angkatan Belia Malaysia, ABIM. Before this, he was its Secretary General, a trained lawyer. He has been very active in civil society, having been the president of the National Union of Malaysian Muslim Student, PKPIM, as well as the Deputy Chairperson of Coalition for Clean and Fair Election, from 2018 until 2020. So yeah, we have a lot of wonderful speakers with here today. And again, if you have questions, leave in the Q&A and we will get to you as soon as we can. Okay, without further ado, I would like to invite Trisha Yeo to give her comments on the finding. Please welcome.
Okay, thank you so much, Salsabila. And once again, thank you to Tan Seng Keat for presenting the survey findings. Very fascinating. I think one very interesting thing, firstly, is that we have a sort of longitudinal survey. So many of the surveys that we have in Malaysia are only able to capture a snapshot in a single point in time. So it's very important for not just this, but anything else that if we want to track trends over time, what we have now, I think is like 4 or 5 years worth of data. And this is very valuable in understanding human society. So let me just say that as someone who is always hoping to work at improving conditions in the country and making things better, understanding ourselves is first and foremost very imperative. So understanding ourselves, the nature of how things are taking place, that gives us a very, very good baseline understanding of what therefore is needed to improve ourselves in the future. Okay, I think I will use my 7 to 10 minutes this way. My first part, I just want to talk a little bit about my opinion about liberalism in the first place. Not very much, just very basic. And then the second part, I will just comment on some of my observations from the survey findings. So again, not that much, but hopefully this will be enough to spark some discussion. So firstly, I think, so liberalism is such a long and heavy word, right? So I think the first thing that we constantly are reminded of is that the problem is many times politicians make use of the term liberal for slightly negative means. So there are negative connotations, and you can even accuse someone of being a liberal. But I think that's very different from the philosophical underpinnings of liberalism as a philosophy, as an ideology, as a way of thinking. So I have a few things to say about that. So first, liberalism as a philosophy is not necessarily set in stone either. I mean, it's a term and a phrase that has been used by many, many philosophers over many hundreds of years. And if you actually study the history of liberalism, the concept, the understanding of this has changed over time. So I think that's very important to accept. It has been taken and used by various philosophers, Rousseau, by French philosophers, over hundreds and hundreds of years. And so the fact that sometimes these things can change and adapt means that they're not necessarily set in stone. But of course, there are a few things that do describe what this philosophy is. So my understanding and my philosophy, and of course, feel free to differ from me, is that it's based on the very, very simple premise that each of us, human beings, you and me, we are actually all gifted and endowed with the intellectual ability to think for ourselves and to be able to describe the world around us for ourselves. So that, for me, that's the very basic premise. Yes, it becomes much more complex when we start to apply it to the world and we apply it to various practices around us. But I think if we can boil it down to that single grain, it is the very basic belief that each of us as individuals, we are endowed with the intellectual ability to think for ourselves, to develop rational understanding, to make sense of the world around us. And yes, we can be certainly supported and assisted. We can have our teachers, we can have our leaders and people helping us to shape that world. But ultimately, we are endowed, we are blessed actually with this abundance. And it's a beautiful philosophy actually, because it means that we actually do believe in ourselves and the ability to think, to rationalize, to emerge with solutions that we believe are actually best suited for ourselves, for our particular communities, in the context, in the world in which we live. So, okay, then I think the survey quite neatly categorizes this into 3 areas. So we have economic liberalism, social liberalism, and political liberalism. So if I were to apply that very basic premise that I mentioned earlier into these 3 areas, so this is how it would be. This is how it would look like. So again, it becomes more complex when we apply it, because in the real world, there are lots of externalities, economic externalities, lots of interests and so on. But again, let's try to boil it down to the basic premise, right? So the basic premise, if we were to apply it in these 3 areas, in economic liberalism, what it actually means is that each person so what we would like to see is the ability of each person to be able to engage in a business, to engage in a trading relationship. Like, I sell you something because this is something that I have to sell, and I buy something from you because that's something that you want to sell. So again, that's the premise of economic liberalism, where we are able to come to an agreement because there's a willing buyer and willing seller. So that's on economic liberalism. On social liberalism, I think this is quite simple to understand. Basically, each of us has this, like I said earlier, this ability to think and believe and shape the world for ourselves. Therefore, it means that things like freedom of speech, the ability to express ourselves, this all is the application in the area of social liberalism. In the area of political liberalism, again, each of us is free to form a political party on our own. Each of us is free to join a political party, to run in an election, to represent the people around us. So that's the application. So now we come to the little bit more of the complexities, right? And I think this is where the second part I would like to now comment on the survey. So I think it's very interesting. First, my observation is that, as Seng Keat actually pointed out, there seem to be quite a lot of inconsistencies actually in the way that people believe, that the belief system seems to be quite incongruous. So the two things that I picked up which were very, very incongruous were, number one, people actually want freedom of speech and they want media freedom. So they believe that these things are important for a healthy, democratic, progressive society. But at the same time, they also want the Sedition Act because they want stability. So sometimes it is, maybe people have, and it incongruous. It doesn't align actually. But if you were to push them a little bit further, how is it possible to have both freedom of speech and a very harsh and strict Sedition Act? In reality, that's not really possible, right? Because if you have a Sedition Act, that means that you're not going to have freedom of speech. So I guess the next question is, how much of freedom do people actually want? So that's one first observation of the incongruence. The second observation from the survey finding is that this is again on the social liberalism, or maybe political as well. People believe that they don't have a right to impose their way of life on other people, right? So that's actually quite liberal in the sense that everyone actually has the freedom to behave in certain ways, to practice their own perhaps faiths in certain ways. But at the same time, they also believe that the government has a very strong hand in preserving a certain particular way of life. And I think what it actually implies is that the government, they would actually provide the right to the government to impose, right, a certain way of life perhaps on others. So I think that's a second incongruence that I caught on. So that's quite interesting. I think for me, I think there needs to be more education about if you really believe that there's no right to impose your way of life on others, then should this argument not be extended to a level of authority, including the government, where the government essentially, what is the government? The government is made up of individuals like you and me. At the end of the day, the government is made up of people who are also the government is also representative of the people. So I think sometimes that's also hazy in our minds. We have this picture of the government as being well, they are legally authorized. So yes, they are the legal authority, but ultimately they are also made up of individuals. So if we have no right to impose the way of life on others, therefore this principle should also apply to the government. Finally, on the part of economic liberalism, I think this is actually not too surprising for me. The fact that people want and expect big government, they want and expect more subsidies, they want and expect more government-linked companies present in the economy. And I think this is because there is a poor understanding as well that actually what happens when you have more and more GLCs, the GLCs can actually cause a strain on the economy, especially for the non or underperforming GLCs, right? So I think the understanding and the unpacking of this, a lot more work needs to be done to explain, why it is that perhaps organizations like ours, I think we have come to a point where we are not saying that government should not be in business entirely. Yes, there can be some justification for it, but if the entities show and display that there's actually a lot of strain on the economy, there's basically government has to bail out the GLCs more than the GLCs are actually contributing meaningfully and valuably to the economy, then this is actually something that needs to be reconsidered altogether. Like, what is the moral purpose? What is the real objective of the existence of such entities? So I think I will stop there for now. I just want to summarize by saying that if we actually boil it down to its very essence of what liberalism is, I think that will help us to understand why it is that that economic, social, and political liberalism, more of that would be a good thing. However, I also understand, and I would take questions later, especially when there are these externalities. And what are these externalities? We can talk about that. It's basically big corporate capture of government. Government itself has inefficiencies, and so we can unpack that. But thank you very much for sharing the survey findings, and I really look forward to my fellow panelists' points of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Trisha. Yeah, so it's very, like inspiring some sort of way, because basically Trisha said that, the ability of people to think, that is very important for us. I think we should be someone who criticize to improve ourselves further, not only just follow by the rules, implemented already, because we want the best to everyone. And so I think that's conclude from Ms. Trisha. We'll follow with YB Amin Ahmad. So let's invite our second speaker to the floor, YB Amin Ahmad. Please welcome.
Okay, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum dan selamat sejahtera. Terima kasih Sabila, Trisha from Ideas, Seng Keat, who presented the findings from the survey of the Merdeka Centre, Faisal Aziz, another fellow panelist. Saya cuba cari poin-poin yang mungkin Trisha belum sentuh. Tak lupa juga kepada semua peserta yang ada lah pada hari ini. Saya ini kali kedua lah saya dalam forum berkenaan dengan topik yang sama yang juga dilakukan oleh Merdeka Centre. Kali pertama dulu saya terlibat pada tahun 2018, jadi kalau boleh tu saya cuba untuk tidak ulang, dan hari ini saya pilih untuk bercakap dalam bahasa Melayu, walaupun tadi panel sebelum program penganjur kata kita boleh guna kedua bahasa. Ini antara lain ialah kerana dalam dapatan kita dalam survey yang terdahulu, kita maklum kita tengok sebenarnya dapatan yang dibentangkan oleh Seng Keat pada hari ini tidak banyak berbeza. Maksudnya dari segi masyarakat umum masih ada jurang pemahaman yang agak besar tentang liberalism, sama ada dia tidak faham ataupun dia kurang faham lah, lack of understanding about what liberalism is. Jadi antara lain yang kita kenal pasti dulu ialah kena faktor bahasa. Faktor bahasa, kalau kita tengok especially dalam dapatan yang diperolehi, kebanyakan khususnya orang Melayu, mereka ni kurang akses kepada idea ini kerana mereka tidak membaca. Kerana banyak isu-isu berkaitan dengan ideologi, bukan sahaja tentang liberalism, bahkan tentang socialism dan yang lain-lain banyak dibincangkan dalam bahasa Inggeris. Mungkin orang kata kerana persoalan ideologi ni dia lebih sophisticated, jadi mungkin kebanyakannya dibincangkan oleh golongan pelajar ataupun golongan yang ada exposure, ada pendedahan terhadap bagaimana ideologi-ideologi ini memberikan kesan kepada kehidupan mereka. Walaupun tadi saya sebut golongan pelajar, ada juga golongan yang mungkin dia tidak terpelajar dalam konteks melanjutkan pengajian di peringkat lebih tinggi, tetapi melalui penglibatan mereka dan pengalaman hidup lah. Jadi ada yang jadi aktivis, ada yang jadi aktivis dalam pelbagai lapangan termasuk dalam persatuan sekerja. Jadi mereka belajar tentang bagaimana ideologi-ideologi ini memberi kesan kepada persekitaran di mana mereka terlibat. Jadi faktor bahasa ni penting kerana nanti saya akan berkaitkan dengan perkara-perkara yang lain telah dibincangkan oleh Seng Keat. Cuma dalam apa yang Seng Keat bentangkan, dan saya pun dah tengok sedikit pendapatan survey ni, saya rasa ada beberapa perkara yang kalau boleh saya nak berbagi cadangan juga kepada Seng Keat dan juga tim di Merdeka Centre ataupun mana-mana kata badan pendidikan ya berkaitan dengan isu ini pada masa akan datang. Kalau saya tengok tadi pun Trisha mungkin dah sentuh sikit tentang wujudnya satu kontradiksi ya antara kata pemahaman masyarakat tentang liberalism dan juga kemahuan mereka kepada dalam satu aspek lah, terutama tentang political liberalism. Itu mereka mahukan negara yang demokratik, mereka mahukan adanya ketinggian undang-undang ataupun rule of law. Jadi kita tengok ada seakan kontradiksi. Cuma mungkin dalam aspek pemahaman ini kita tengok tadi about kira hampir seimbang antara mereka yang mengaku mereka pernah mendengar kan, tentang liberalism dan juga mereka tidak pernah mendengar. Jadi mungkin yang kita boleh pergi dengan lebih dalam sedikit dengan bertanya tentang sumber daripada mana mereka mendengar. Jadi dengan mengetahui sumber ini kita tahulah kenapa wujudnya salah faham dan bagaimana idea tentang liberalism ini dapat dipersembahkan ataupun disampaikan dengan lebih baik kepada khalayak umum. Saya ingat saya terlibat dengan Malaysia Think Tank London, nama-lama ideas lah. Saya dulu merupakan founding staff di Malaysia Think Tank London dan kemudian juga berkhidmat dengan ideas. Antara pendirian awal kita pada masa lalu ialah untuk bagaimana untuk mempromosikan atau mengembangkan liberalisme dalam bahasa Melayu. Kerana kita percaya dalam konteks Malaysia ini seharusnya menjadi bahasa komunikasi politik supaya politik kita lebih cepatlah menjadi sophisticated. Kalau kita tidak cuba memenangi ground pembaca, pendengar dalam bahasa Melayu, jadi ground bahasa Melayu ini akan dikuasai oleh kumpulan-kumpulan yang mungkin mempersembahkan idea ini dalam bentuk yang salah, menyimpang dan terpesong. Dan bukan saja itu, jadi banyak suntikan ideologi-ideologi yang lain yang menggunakan media bahasa Melayu akan lebih mengambil tempat. Jadi mungkin kalau boleh saya cadangkan kepada Merdeka Centre dalam survey akan datang, kita boleh masuk tanyakan kepada responden daripada mana sekiranya mereka pernah mendengar, daripada mana mereka mendengar tentang liberalism ini ya. Jadi daripada situ kita mungkin boleh membuat kata analisa yang lebih dalam sedikit. Ini kadang saya agak menarik kerana bila ramai mengatakan mereka kurang mendengar dan menunjukkan ketidakpemahaman, tidak ada pemahaman yang jelas, pada masa yang sama mereka boleh jawab soalan good or bad tadi kan, sama ada liberalism ni baik atau buruk. Jadi baik atau buruk ni sudah tentulah bergantung kepada sumber yang mereka dengar ataupun baca lah. Jadi yalah, saya pun tidak pasti bagaimana setengah responden ini boleh menjawab sama ada liberalism itu baik ataupun buruk sekiranya mereka tidak jelas tentang idea itu sendiri. Dan kalau kita tengok dan juga dalam di kalangan kata mereka yang faham tentang idea liberalism sekalipun, mungkin dalam penulisan dan juga pengucapan yang dibuat, selalunya kita hanya membincangkan tentang bagaimana ideal ataupun nilai-nilai liberalism ataupun liberalism values ni, bagaimana dia dipersembahkan dalam bentuk praktis. Kita kadang-kadang bersifat apologetik, kita tidak mahu menggunakan istilah liberalism ini kerana kita sendiri pun takut ia disalahfahami. Jadi ini menyebabkan setengah values yang kita terangkan tadi tentang demokrasi, tentang prinsip ketinggian undang-undang ataupun equality before the laws dan sebagainya, kadang-kadang orang tidak dapat kaitkan apabila kita tulis ataupun bercakap tentang nilai-nilai ini. Orang tak dapat kaitkan dengan liberalism kerana yalah, mereka suka, mereka sebagaimana dalam dapatan survey, mereka suka, mereka boleh setuju, tapi mereka tidak tahu bahawa itu adalah sebahagian daripada nilai dan juga kata prinsip liberalisme lah. Jadi ini memang satu cabaran lah bagaimana untuk kita mempersembahkan ataupun mempromosikan liberalisme dalam masyarakat. Okay. Dan kalau kita tengok juga tentang soalan yang kita tengok ada spektrum yang berbeza. dalam dapatan survey ni kita tengok dalam aspek tadi political freedom tu dia lebih banyak lah, sebab bila masyarakat mahukan negara yang demokratik, mahukan ada prinsip ketinggian undang-undang dan sebagainya, kita nampak seolah-olah masyarakat ada kecenderungan untuk boleh menerima liberalism dalam aspek politik. Tetapi kita tengok dalam aspek sosial dan juga ekonomi, kita tengok masyarakat cenderung untuk mahukan campur tangan kerajaan yang besar dalam kedua-dua aspek ini. Jadi ini juga bagi saya menjelaskan kenapa dalam pengalaman di Malaysia, kenapa politik itu selalu ada tension, kerana sudah tentulah bila mereka mahukan campur tangan yang besar dalam aspek sosial dan juga ekonomi, sudah tentu kalau kita tengok dalam dapatan survey ini dia ada faktor sejarah dia lah, kerana ada rasa terutamanya di kalangan orang Melayu ataupun Muslim, ada rasa dilindungi, dan sudah tentulah mereka tidak tanya sama ada dilindungi secara benar, baik ataupun tidak. Jadi mungkin juga dalam soalan yang boleh dikemukakan oleh Merdeka Centre dalam kajian yang akan datang dalam berkaitan dengan hubungan ini, sebab kalau saya tengok tadi dalam survey itu kita tanya setuju tak kerajaan membantu orang susah. Saya ingat in general kalau tanya siapa pun itu setuju. Cuma mungkin bagi orang-orang yang percaya kepada ideologi liberalisme ini, bentuk bantuan itu mungkin berbeza. Kalau kita cakap perlu bantu, orang liberal pun saya percaya dia percaya kerajaan perlu bantu, tetapi bantu yang bagaimana? Jadi ini mungkin dalam aspek kajian kita boleh tanya dengan yang lebih detail. Misalnya ini termasuk dengan political liberalism, kita boleh bertanya kepada responden sama ada mereka boleh bersetuju ataupun tidak bahawa government ataupun kerajaan itu juga boleh menjadi satu ancaman kepada demokrasi, ataupun kerajaan itu boleh menyebabkan kedudukan ekonomi. Misalnya kita tanya birokrasi kerajaan boleh menjejaskan ekonomi penduduk. Saya ingat kalau kita tanya begitu, orang ramai boleh bersetuju bahawa birokrasi kerajaan itu boleh menjejaskan ekonomi mereka. Jadi kalau kita the way we frame the question, cara kita bertanya dengan soalan ni boleh mempengaruhi dapatan kita lah. Kalau kita tanya sama ada kerajaan, birokrasi kerajaan menjejaskan kalau golongan peniaga lah, mereka ingat majoriti akan bersetuju. Jadi adakah kita nak mengatakan persetujuan mereka ini berarti mereka ni inline dengan mereka ni sudah embrace liberalism? Sudah tentu tak semestinya, sebab masyarakat umum dia tak peduli pun tentang ideologi, tetapi dengan cara itu kita mungkin boleh nampak kata ruang-ruang bagaimana ada liberalisme ini dapat dipersembahkan dengan lebih kita kata objektif lah. Kerana kalau dalam kita cakap tadi tentang economic liberalism, sebenarnya kita bercakap tentang bagaimana kita nak kurangkan campur tangan kerajaan. Misalnya dalam dia ada banyak aspek lah. Sudah tentu kita cakap tadi saya bagi contoh tentang bagaimana kita dapat mengurangkan red tape, birokrasi supaya perniagaan dapat berlari. Jadi kita boleh cari lagi soalan-soalan yang bersifat positif yang orang ramai rasa lebih dekat dengan diri mereka. Okey. Jadi mungkin dalam pusingan pertama saya punya komen lebih bersifat begitulah. Dan tengok tadi memang Seng Keat pun ada sebut, jadi saya pun tidak mahu ulang dengan panjang lebar. Sebenarnya memang ada perbezaan yang ketara antara kata pemahaman dan kemahuan mereka dalam aspek politik, dan kita dapat melihat ini juga pemahaman berbeza ini juga wujud dalam segmentasi kaum lah, yang mana kita tengok boleh kata kebanyakan Melayu Muslim melihat liberalism ni dalam konteks yang agak negatif, bukan agak lagi lah, memang negatif lah. Jadi untuk saya sebagai orang yang percaya bahawa liberalism mempunyai banyak nilai-nilai yang baik, kita mesti mencari jalan lah untuk mempromosikan. Kadang-kadang ialah dalam konteks liberalism tidak begitu difahami dalam masyarakat. Kadang-kadang orang liberal ni dia nak ialah promosikan liberal ni sebagai satu package. Maksud dia kita mesti sebut tentang segalanya tentang liberalism. Bagi saya ini satu mungkin perkara yang boleh dibincangkan, dan bagaimanakah liberalism boleh dipromosikan dengan lebih baik, khususnya dalam aspek-aspek yang boleh membantu orang ramai secara langsung lah. Tadi saya sebut contoh birokrasi, banyak contoh kita tengok. Saya selalu sebut contoh ni dalam banyak perkara lain. Misalnya zaman Tun Abdullah Ahmad Badawi, bagaimana dia boleh mempercepatkan proses pengeluaran pasport. Ini salah satu sebenarnya kata liberalism values. Maksud dia bagaimana kerajaan, kata red tape kerajaan dapat dikurangkan, kerajaan boleh bertindak dengan lebih cekap. Berbanding kita menggunakan istilah, misalnya kita kata, instead of kita kata kurangkan campur tangan kerajaan dalam tak kira lah politik atau ekonomi, mungkin kita boleh frame soalan ini tentang bagaimana urusan kerajaan boleh menjadi lebih terbuka dan lebih cekap. Okay. Dan saya ingat antara mungkin salah satu ini nak menunjukkan bagaimana idea liberalisme itu agak ke belakang di Malaysia. Kita ambil misalnya laporan Suhakam, ini sebuah suruhanjaya yang ditubuhkan oleh kerajaan. Setakat penubuhannya sehingga kini baru sekali saja dibahaskan di Parlimen, itu pun di zaman Pakatan Harapan bila berlaku pertukaran kerajaan tidak ada lagi laporan Suhakam. Jadi ini maksudnya persoalan tentang kebebasan dalam negara ini tidak dibincangkan secara meluas, dan kalau dibincangkan sekalipun berbalik kepada apa yang saya sebut di awal tadi, dia dibincangkan dalam bahasa yang saya sifatkan sebagai eksklusif. Maksud digunakan dalam bahasa Inggeris, dibincangkan oleh golongan yang kalau boleh saya sebut sebagai golongan elit dah, terutama golongan terpelajar yang lebih terdedah kepada idea-idea ini. Jadi sudah tentulah kata kita tengok bila berlaku pertemuan ini, dia jadi pertemuan antara kumpulan ini dengan kumpulan yang kita boleh sebutkan sebagai konservatif. Tentulah golongan konservatif ini outnumbers lah, kata dengan jumlah yang sangat besar. Jadi ini memang akan melambatkan lagi proses asimilasi lah tentang bagaimana liberalisme itu dapat sebenarnya penting, baik dan juga dapat memberi manfaat kepada orang ramai. Jadi saya ingat komen saya dalam pusingan pertama begitulah. Jadi saya serahkan semula kepada Salsabila sebagai moderator.
Terima kasih YB atas perkongsian tersebut. Jadi melalui perkongsian YB Amin tadi, kita dapat memahamilah isu yang telah berlaku sekarang ini, iaitu bagaimanakah akses masyarakat kita terhadap perbincangan-perbincangan dalam ekonomi. Jadi saya rasa ini merupakan satu masalah yang kita dapat lihat, iaitu bagaimana proses perbincangan dilakukan oleh golongan-golongan elit dan juga dalam bentuk atau medium yang sukar untuk difahami, iaitu medium bahasa Inggeris. Dan bahasa Melayu ini, dan seharusnya karya-karya yang melibatkan ekonomi, hal politik, sosial semua diperbanyakkan dalam bahasa Melayu. Jadi saya rasa ini adalah satu isu yang perlu diperhalusi oleh kerajaan kita terutamanya, kerana apabila kita tengok kepada isu ini, jika kita dapat menghasilkan lebih banyak perbincangan dalam bahasa Melayu, saya rasa masyarakat akan lebih memahami apa itu konsep liberalisme dan tidak akan berlakulah salah faham terhadap konsep dan juga membuatkan masyarakat kita takut atau gerun apabila mereka mendengar perkataan liberalisme ini sendiri. Setelah itu, saya rasa terima kasih YB Amin atas perkongsian tersebut sekali lagi. Jadi saya menganjurkan event kita pada hari ini dalam dua bahasa. Moga-moga pendengar kita pada hari ini dapat lebih memahamilah konteks yang kita tengah bincangkan. Terima kasih sekali lagi, dan sekarang saya ingin menjemput Faisal Aziz, pengurusi ABIM untuk sesi seterusnya. Dipersilakan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, happy Ramadan. Mr. Seng Keat, Director for Research Merdeka Centre, Puan Salsabila, Trisha, and YB Amir Ahmad. First of all, thank you for having ABIM to share some lights in this conversation, and it is a commendable effort by Merdeka Centre to have a comprehensive survey on the perception of the Malaysian on liberalism. Okay, first, saya rasa saya nak touch the main issue seperti mana juga yang disebut oleh YB Amir Ahmad, especially on liberalism among the Malay community. Sebab kalau kita tengok dalam survey itu disebut about 100% of the Muslim saying that liberalism is idea that against Islam, dan juga 90% of Muslim say that liberalism is a bad doctrine. So kita kena address isu ini, dan saya rasa mungkin Merdeka Centre ada follow up question, not sure lah. Maksudnya okay, contohnya bila Muslim kata 100% of 100% of Muslim kata liberalism against Islam, mungkin ada follow up question, kenapa? Then baru kita tahulah pandangan ataupun persepsi Muslim, kenapa bagi mereka ia adalah bad ataupun perkara yang against Islam lah. Okay, cuma bagi kita Abim, mungkin kita nak kongsi sikit tentang isu besar tentang kenapa liberalism tidak mendapat tempat di hati orang-orang Melayu dah khususnya. Satu, atas faktor bahasa seperti mana yang disebut oleh YB Amir Ahmad, akses bahasa. Dan sebab itu juga Abim, kita menerbitkan banyak buku-buku on liberalism dalam bahasa Melayu yang membawa tokoh-tokoh renowned scholars daripada Timur Tengah dan sebagainya, daripada luar negara, untuk memberi pendedahan tentang liberalism dalam konteks agama dan kepentingannya untuk masyarakat lah kan. Okay, so my first comment, kenapa especially mungkin especially among the Malays, I mean we have bad perception on liberalism. First is about the definition. Saya melihat isu besarnya ialah kegagalan kita ataupun mereka yang bawa idea liberalism ni memberi definisi apa itu liberalism. They should define what is liberalism. Dan bila sebut define, kena define what is liberalism based on ialah respective understanding, dan lama sama based on the objective that we outline. Okay, meaning to say, bila kita define liberalism, kita harus membawa idea liberalism yang sebenarnya memberi manfaat kepada semua. Tapi masalah utama ialah terdapat loopholes ataupun mungkin kelompongan in terms of how to define liberalism, sebab dia mungkin quite philosophical dan orang melihat secara praktikal ia adalah sesuatu yang bersifat kompetitif. Sebab contoh kalau kita tengok, kalau saya boleh komen lah, dekat within the Malaysian context kan, the idea of liberalism ni always appears to be brought in a combative approach instead of trying to harmonize within the Malaysian context. Contoh macam dalam konteks agama, public melihat liberalism ni sebagai satu tool untuk membawa perkara-perkara yang kontroversial. Contohnya macam intra-Islam, Islam and Syiah, kemudian mungkin juga isu-isu seperti LGBT dan sebagainya. Instead of trying to prioritize in the first place how to harmonize liberalism within the context of the Malaysian context, contohnya, sometimes people yang bawa idea of liberalism ni try to be in a combative approach or to reconstruct this secara drastic perkara-perkara yang sedia ada dan sebagainya. So dia trigger fear ataupun kemarahan lah dalam kalangan local community, yang akhirnya mereka melihat liberalism ni sebagai satu idea yang sebenarnya bertujuan untuk reconstruct the status quo, the fundamental principle of Islam and so on. Dan juga dalam diskurs kawan-kawan kita di Indonesia, penting apa yang berlaku di Indonesia ni sebenarnya dia intertwine dengan isu di Malaysia, sama juga dengan Singapura dan sebagainya. Dan bila kita sebut tentang Islam, basically kita ada correlation between Islam kat Malaysia dan Indonesia. Apa yang berlaku di Indonesia ni sebenarnya dia akan memberi refleksi kepada apa yang akan berlaku di Malaysia. Dan di Indonesia, discussion tentang Islam liberal ni amat berat, dan dia memberi persepsi bahawa adakah liberalism di Malaysia ini akan membawa kepada jaringan Islam liberal seperti di Indonesia. Banyak buku-buku yang pernah diterbitkan, contohnya tentang tanggapan tentang Islam liberal dan sebagainya. Jadi dia memberi persepsi yang tidak baik dalam konteks komuniti Muslim terhadap isu liberalism. Okey, dan situasi ini kegagalan mereka untuk memberi definisi tentang liberalism dalam konteks yang positif, memberi manfaat kepada masyarakat, akhirnya dia mencipta satu ruang untuk orang lain memberi definisi. Dan orang lain itu ialah mereka yang anti-liberalism. So mereka yang anti-liberalism ni membawa definisi bahawa liberalism ni anti-Islam, anti-federal constitution, reconstructing the fundamental principle of Islam. Mereka yang membawa definisi baru based on sentiments. So akhirnya maksudnya dia menyemarakkan lagi rasa benci ataupun kemarahan terhadap liberalism kan. So that's why bila kita lihat dalam konteks ini, kita tak boleh kata Muslim ataupun Malay tidak rasional ataupun ya mungkin pendedahan tu kurang, tapi bagi kita in the first place kegagalan kita untuk memberi definisi yang sesuai sebenarnya. Apa liberalism yang ingin kita bawa yang memberi manfaat kepada semua. Tapi sebaliknya kita cuba untuk membawa yang tadi disebut combative approach. Dalam masa sama kita membiarkan orang yang anti liberalism ni define what is liberalism based on that kind of combative approach. So ini isu besar yang saya fikir kita kena address. Dan akhirnya orang akan percaya kepada definisi yang dibawa atau yang dibuat oleh kelompok-kelompok yang memainkan sentimen. Dan sebab tu kalau mungkin saya nak share juga dalam konteks ABIM, for us benda yang ABIM bawa ataupun tema yang ABIM bawa simple tapi dia ada unsur-unsur harmonizing between each other. ABIM, our stance is clear. We should not liberate Islam. Instead, we should let Islam liberate us. Kita tidak boleh nak liberate Islam, maksudnya dalam konteks reconstructing the fundamental principle of Islam. But at the same time, we should allow or we should let Islam to liberate us. So, dalam berarti kata lain, having understanding how to harmonize between Islam or not only Islam lah, multi religions in the society dengan agenda liberalism is very important. Sebab in the Malaysian context, not only Malaysian context, but in general Asian society pun, we are religious society. So any kind of concept that downgrading, that is perceived as downgrading the religion, so it will trigger fear, it will trigger anger among the people. So satu based on the survey, bagi saya penting untuk kita cuba melihat kembali bagaimana untuk kita melihat ataupun bagaimana kita present liberalism ni dalam konteks yang sesuai, dalam konteks yang sebenarnya dia bersifat harmonize, memberi manfaat kepada semua, dan bukan bersifat yang tadi saya sebut combative yang dilihat sebagai seolah-olah memberi threat kepada agama. Dan yang terakhir juga kalau saya nak kongsi, dalam masa yang sama ramai orang dia ada tendensi untuk melihat idea liberalism ni in the same basket as any ideas that coming from the West. Okay, walaupun dekat barat ni dia ada banyak school of thoughts about liberalism kan, tapi society dia melihat dia sebagai in the same basket. Okay, so kalau liberalism sama. Jadi isu berlaku, jadi masalah yang timbul ialah apabila orang melihat isu di France. Contohnya France ni negara yang sebut tentang liberalism, tentang demokrasi, freedom. Tapi dia ada angle-angle berbeza disebut tentang secularism and so on, especially on religious freedom. So contohnya macam the recent ban of hijab for Muslim kan, Muslim women yang bawah 18 tahun. So ini clear example yang mana orang melihat inconsistency. Akhirnya orang ataupun mungkin masyarakat akan melihat liberalism ni digunakan untuk certain perkara saja. Sedangkan macam saya sebut, kalau di barat itu liberalism ni dia ada banyak school of thoughts. Tapi masyarakat dia dilihat dalam satu bakul in the same basket, datang daripada yang sama. Tapi bila mana secara praktikal timbul isu-isu yang tadi saya sebut, mengharamkan hijab. Jadi orang akan melihat so liberalism ni tak konsisten. Bila when it comes to freedom of religion, so they have some reservation on that. Jadi ini bagi saya isu yang perlu diberikan pencerahan lebih. Selain daripada isu agama, saya melihat sebenarnya masyarakat juga mungkin tidak ada masalah sangat bila sebut tentang liberalism dalam konteks ekonomi, sosial dan juga politik. Macam tadi kita sebut ekonomi, betul. Bila mana soalan tu ditanya, adakah kita merasakan bahawa orang miskin tanpa mengira kaum perlu diberi bantuan? Dan inilah spirit rakyat Malaysia. Orang miskin tak kisah warna kulit, bangsa, agama, harus diberikan bantuan, harus diberikan sokongan oleh kerajaan. Tapi dalam konteks agama mungkin akan membawa kepada perbezaan, dan juga kalau kita tengok dalam survey yang lain juga tadi, saya ingat Trisha juga disebut tentang Sedition Act dan sebagainya. Jadi akhir sekali mungkin kita melihat bagaimana kita melihat isu ini secara in stages ataupun incremental. Contoh macam dia sebut Sedition Act, orang nak kebebasan tapi orang nak juga undang-undang yang mengawal kebebasan. Jadi pokoknya mungkin orang tidak bersedia untuk melihat perubahan secara drastik. Bagaimana akhir sekali kita cuba mediate rakyat Malaysia untuk mencari jalan penyelesaian. At the end of the day, we need to find solution, how to mediate this issue, to find common ground. Sebab akhirnya based on the research kita tengok banyak common ground sebenarnya yang boleh kita lihat, anti corruption, yang tadi membantu orang-orang susah. This kind of the common grounds that sebenarnya kita boleh amplify untuk find amicable solution lah. Saya ingat itu saja dulu. Terima kasih Puan Salsabila.
Thank you for the sharing. It's very good. Yeah, and you make it into both English and Malay. So I think it's very helpful towards our listeners today. And it's already 11:10, so I'll open the Q&A. There's one question from Dr. Liana Khairuddin. She asks, I guess moving forward, the question would be, who defines or control the narrative for liberalism? And second, how can we liberals expand the education on what is liberalism beyond the Klang Valley bubble? So I guess I'll open the question to the floor first. So I'll open to every speakers, maybe 2 to 3 minutes to comment. So I pass to Trisha first.
Thank you so much. And thank you, of course, YB Amin and Faisal and Seng Keat. Maybe we can all leave our videos on because this session Q&A, the next 45 minutes or so, all of us are free to answer the questions. So the first thing is from Liana, who defines and controls the narrative for liberalism, and how can we liberals expand the education on what is liberalism beyond the Klang Valley bubble? Well, who defines what liberalism is? I think I mentioned in my remarks earlier that the philosophy has changed over the many hundreds of years, but there are still some core principles which I outlined, and if we were to apply those core principles to the various aspects of life, of human life, of living, then that's where I believe those who are keen on expressing liberalism would define it, but who controls the narrative? That's essentially all of us, right? Because the controlling of the narrative, I mean, I actually wanted to just respond as so maybe I'll take this chance to also respond to what Faisal was saying. I completely agree that it's not helpful to use liberalism in a combative approach. So that's already a non-starter. So once we start to say that, okay, liberalism is an affront to religion, it's an affront to Asian cultural values and beliefs, that does not help the conversation. I would like to see in the future how we could say, and I think this is also taken from YB Amin, right? Like, how can aspects of liberalism help us to think about problems that our current society is facing, right? So how can aspects of liberalism how can aspects of liberalism contribute to, say, poverty alleviation, right? How can aspects of liberalism help us to recognize the values of each other's religions and ethnicities in order to promote national unity and racial and religious harmony? So I think that's a more functional way of looking at liberalism, rather than just as this like big philosophy. What does it mean? What is the philosophy? Does it bercanggah dengan our Islamic beliefs and so on? So I think taking it from that practical approach, that might be more functional. So the aspect of liberalism for me that helps with, say, poverty would be that if we were to ensure that there are more potential opportunities for small traders, small individual businessmen to flourish, you know, without having to have, you know, corrupt license payments, those kinds of rent-seeking arrangements. That is positive for poverty because they can actually increase their incomes, and if the wage levels increase generally, then they will push themselves out of poverty, right? So that's one way of thinking about it. How can aspects of liberalism help us to think about racial unity? So an aspect of liberalism would be the belief that, you know, we all have our individual cultural and specific religious or ethnic practices without the right to impose our own way of life on others. That is an aspect of liberalism that we can use to help in national unity. So I think who controls the narrative? I believe it would be actually us. Or rather, we should not let those who are taking the narrative in a negative connotation, we should not let them control the narrative, because, you know, really it's up to us. And how can we liberals expand the education on what is liberalism beyond the Klang Valley bubble? Well, I think we are starting on a good note by speaking, you know, partially in Malay, and hopefully we can do more of that. But saya minta maaf lah, bahasa Melayu saya, it's only half-baked. I can do some things, but not everything in bahasa. Yeah, so that would be my answer for now. Anyone?
All right, thank you, Trisha. So yeah, I'll pass to YB Amin.
So we are going to answer the first question from Dr. Liana. I think the public discussion should be open to the public. I would rather have different views in the public rather than trying to control the narrative, because I think the words control itself is basically not in the liberal dictionary. So as mentioned by Trisha just now, I mean, we should claim, we who believe in liberalism should claim the space. I remember when I started working with Malaysia think tank London, I mean, basically ideas. Initially back in 2007, I wrote several articles. Actually, I already wrote, I think, hundreds of articles in Malay, I mean, to share my views about liberalism. I wrote about how we can save our recreational forests. So I mean, that's the title. So, but the ideas that I put in and as a content for the articles is about liberalism. We should privatize the management of the recreational forest. I wrote about how we can save our football scene by, I mean our football league should not subsidized by the government. I mean, we should slowly moving towards the privatization of football. This is kind of like popular areas that rarely discussed by those who believe in liberals' ideal. So we should find out which area that we can put liberalism in practice. So instead of discussing some economic issues in a very exclusive ways, I mean, sometimes liberals tend to discuss about fiscal measures. So I think it is quite exclusive to those who understand economy in theory, but not. I mean, the ideas is not shared by a public at large. I remember I also wrote about how globalization enrich cultures. I remember I quoted that during the Malacca Sultanate, we have 84 languages spoken by the population, and why, suddenly now we are so sensitive about the Chinese language, about the Jawi language. So, this is kind of, the opinion articles that we should write and share to public, regardless in any language. But as I mentioned earlier, I prefer to write in Malay because I believe this is the hardest battle that I have to overcome in Malaysia. Besides that, so just earlier, Salsabila already mentioned that I founded my own think tank in 2014 after I left Ideas. I mean, even since my time in ideas, we organize like quite a number of training for, especially for young activists and students. I mean, to share with them about how, what is liberalism. So, I mean, from the training, we are hoping that there are more and more people, especially among the young educated Malaysians, who can understand how what is liberalism and how the ideas can shape our public discourse. I mean, initially, and how the policy who are illiberalism policies can impact, I mean, their livelihood. I know that in the second question, I can read in the Q&A box from Kok Liang Chiu. He asked, I mean, does liberalism in Malaysia have any real effects on bread and butter issues? Maybe, I mean, if I may respond, I mean, give a short response to this question. Maybe we should ask whether, I mean, the situation that we are facing now is actually because we are lack of liberalism in the country. So we are having the situation where the most population have to satisfied with low salary because I mean you can see as discussed by many liberals proponent that our government we have a bloated government. I mean, bloated not just in sense of number of public servant, but of course, I mean the use of tax revenue to fund the government machinery. I mentioned that during Tun Abdullah Ahmad Badawi's time, we spent 88% of the tax revenue for the operational expenditure. And during Najib's time, although the subsidies have been reduced more than 50%. I mean, during Pak Laf's time in 2009, if I'm not mistaken, it was like 74 billion. And during Najib last year in 2018, it's already around 30 billion. But the operational expenditure is at 95 to 99%. I mean, during Najib's time as a prime minister. So this is how we show to the, I mean, we can educate the public how a lack of liberalism actually can affect their life. Because I mean, when the government is so bloated and government do like white elephant projects, I mean, they spend our money through taxation. I mean the government revenue is coming mostly through the taxation. So of course, I mean, with the most population who are having like less than 3,000 ringgit per month, I mean, the discretionary income for them is little too small. To increase their quality of life. Okay, I think I pass back to Sabila.
Okay, thanks, YB Amin. So apparently he already talked about the second question, which is from Kok Liang Chu. Does liberalism in Malaysia have any real effects on bread and butter issues? So recent Mohi survey shows that at least 10% of fresh grads received 1 to 1.5K monthly salary since 2010, with 22% falling into this category in 2020. So we know that the monthly minimum wage is 1.1 thousand and nationally poverty line is 2.2K, where households with a monthly income below this are considered poor households. So yeah, so I think I'll pass to Faisal Aziz, maybe to also answer the first question just now. Yeah.
Okay, first from Dr. Liana, who controls the narrative of liberalism? My answer is those who can translate the idea into the practical solution or into the practical ways. Because yes, of course, people want to see the actions rather than just to start with the conceptual ideology, yeah, to debate, to have the discourses on what is the definition of liberalism. But people want to have, how do we translate the idea of liberalism into action, and how does it benefit the society? So that's my first answer. Who controls or defines the idea of liberalism? Those who can bring the practical solution based on the framework of liberalism to the current problems that we are facing. And going to another question about the economy, bread and butter. Yes, I do agree, because when we talk about the liberalism, especially the liberalism itself or economic liberalism, it will bring or it will lead to innovative and creative economy. If we, if we still stuck with the current perhaps system of economy, or like now the current structure that we are having, for example, on the issue of serving the poor based on the color, for instance. So we are stuck with the system which we fail to move forward to be more innovative or critical in finding a better solution for the future of Malaysian generation. So when we talk about economy, of course, liberal economy is very important. As I said, at least for us to be more creative, to find more practical solution in a bread and butter issue. Okay, and at the same time, about the healthy competition, for example, persaingan sihat, of course it is a need. So liberalism plays very important role, at least to have this kind of healthy competitive in terms of economy. But yes, of course, at the same time, as I said, we have to be creative and innovative. When we talk about liberalism in terms of economy, we should not sideline the people who are really in poor. Of course, when we talk about subsidy and so on, they must have some threshold, of course. We should not subsidize the whole Malaysian, but of course, in terms of liberal economy, we need to have more clear picture in terms of objective. What kind of objective that we want to achieve heading forward? Equitable justice or equitable economy and so on. So liberal economy have some impact in giving a solution for bread and butter issue. But as I said, at least to have some creative or innovative way of thinking of economy.
Yeah, maybe I can just comment, since we're talking about the economic perspective as well. The size of government is, like exactly as YB Amin says, usually an indicator where we say that that's not so liberal, because if the government is so big, then basically what you're giving the government license to do is to be able to make decisions on behalf of the citizens. So if government can step in at every moment of your life to make decisions for you, then actually how free are you able to exercise your own, like I said again, your own intellectual reason, your own ability to make decisions by yourself. So if you step out of the house and if you buy something that's actually your rice, for example, maybe it's actually, that the rice is very heavily monopolized. And if the price that you're paying or the product that you're buying actually is heavily influenced by the government, then that's already an indication that government is big. And just talking about the size of government, our Prime Minister's department is very significant in terms of the budget of the entire government budget. It's 11.7 billion ringgit out of 322 billion ringgit, and it's actually increasing every year as a proportion of the total budget. So, if we're talking about a top-heavy government, we do have a very top-heavy government in the form of the Prime Minister's department. I also like Faisal's point about how liberalism actually contributes to the creation of a creative and innovative economy. Basically, competition actually does allow us to have more high-value types of economic activities, which leads to better, economic outcomes. So, what is it that we don't want? Is that we don't want subsidies or anything that the government imposes which can cause distortion. So, what does distortion mean, right? So in our research on the agriculture sector, again, about the bernas and rice-related monopoly, we do have subsidies now, but the subsidies are actually distortive, meaning that the subsidies don't actually allow the farmers to produce better results. So we have proposed another alternative, which is that, yes, you can have a subsidy, but the subsidy needs to be tied to something that will allow the farmers to become more productive. So that's actually like, I mean, once you start talking about it, it can get quite technical actually. But the point is that, yes, we can apply the kind of big philosophical concepts of liberalism into something that's more practical in nature. And I will still also want to add that if the research shows that the subsidy can work and is productive, that's okay. But I think so far our research has shown that the subsidies actually are not healthy. So when they're unhealthy, then you need another alternative that will allow for greater, productive capacity, and ultimately to improve the livelihoods of the people that we're talking about, whether it's farmers or fishermen or whoever. Yeah, okay, we have quite a lot of questions coming in now. So maybe Salsabila needs to decide how.
Yeah, Trisha already answered on the economy, and I think Faisal also, has somehow addressed, but maybe you can talk more about, because since government is formed to make rule of laws, this is the question from So Why. So because government is supposed to form laws, so what do you think of this? Like, yeah, what should be like? I think like the degree of liberalism that we talk about in context of economic liberalism, right? And then second is on social. So if there is too much freedom, so we will have a lot of problems basically. So what is the fine balance that we can achieve without slinging extreme left or right? And the other one is on political. So we know that our problem with the parliament currently, and their ability they are not able to discuss properly the issues. So what do you think that our younger generation should do about it? Yeah, so yeah, I'll pass to Trisha again.
Sure, but I also want to welcome Seng Keat, if you have any views to comment as well. So too much freedom, how do we strike a balance? Yeah, this is a question that always comes up. I have always considered using this principle called the harm principle, because the problem is that once you start to control what people can and cannot say, including criticism of other people, then what you have is a very slippery slope, because then you're going to start controlling everything. So you're going to start saying that you should not have any criticism about anything at all. And this is not healthy, because you eventually go down this slippery slope into becoming what is essentially, or what could potentially become, a dictatorship, right? So, so this is the problem with the Sedition Act actually, because you start controlling, okay, what you can and cannot criticize. So the harm principle is a very useful thing to consider, which is that if you say something that will actually lead somebody to physically harm someone else, then that would be my line. Like that would be the limit of the freedom. But unless it is something that is really directly like intentionally intending to harm someone, anything below that line, I would say that's actually permissible. And we need to also be able to build ourselves up to be emotionally resilient to withstand the criticisms of others, because that also makes us stronger. So this would apply, on anything. I mean, criticisms about the government, criticisms about our practices, our beliefs. I know it's a difficult thing to imagine, but actually the criticisms allow us to emerge with stronger answers for ourselves, and to emerge with beliefs that we can really hold to ourselves. The second question about how Parliament cannot discuss things now, I mean, yeah, I think this is absolutely wrong. I think what we have now is the complete opposite of political liberalism, actually, where Parliament cannot provide scrutiny over any of the budgets, for instance, that are being rolled out, that are being implemented. So this is something that needs to end soon. I really do hope that the leaders will make a decision to end the emergency as soon as possible. Yeah, so back to you.
All right, thanks, Trisha. So maybe from YB Amin, if you have, yeah.
Okay, I'll try to give short answer for question by COY. On economic liberalism, I think we are talking about government intervention. I think let us be honest that there, I mean, from my best of knowledge, there are no government, even in US, I mean, they have like some sort of intervention. So what we should identify, I mean, first we have to acknowledge that we are, I mean, a country in the transition. We are stuck in the as a middle income, upper middle income country for so long, and we hope that we can make a breakthrough to be a developed country. And by, I mean, to achieve that, we should also identify what is a productive intervention instead of asking government to, I mean, to intervene in every part of economic life. As I mentioned earlier, I mean, about the red tape. I mean, Malaysia is doing quite good if we look at the ease of doing business index. I mean, we are, I think, top 5 in the world, if I'm not mistaken. And how can we translate this achievement at the ground level? I mean, meaning we have to train our like local councils. I mean the many government agencies, how they can play a role to ease the, I mean, to support the open economic environment. So I debated about this in the parliament, I mean, several times, and I'm not sure whether, I mean, the minister understand what I try to convey. And on the social liberalism, I mean, it's very hard to find the right balance. I mean, throughout history, people wanting freedom, and at the same time they also wanting justice. So that's why I prefer that we should have an open environment in which not just promoting about liberalism idea, we should also hear the response from, I mean, different group of people, because I mean, the changing of policies have a lot of unintended consequences. For example, I mean, during Pakatan Harapan's time, I don't know who give advice to the Minister of Finance, but I know that there are some like fourth floor boys during Pak Las time still in the Ministry of Finance. I mean, they decided, I mean, to scrap the allowance for the fishermen and farmers. So it has created a lot of pushback. I mean, and it has forced the Dr. Sri Anwar Ibrahim to fight back in the parliament, because I mean, you cannot just simply like stop the allowance like that. I mean, so policy changes for a country in transition should be done more delicately. I mean, so that we don't face unintended consequences. And in Malaysia, when you did that in Malaysia, because most of the farmers and the fishermen are Malays, you see, I mean, you can see, I mean, how, I mean, it turns, I mean, from the economic issues, it turns to be race and religious issues, because I mean, unfortunately, I mean, Lim Guan Eng is from the different race and religion. So, I mean, policy changing needs more attention by the executive, and of course, executive can only do it better by engaging with, I mean, different group stakeholders and group of experts. And on the political liberalism, and what should the younger generation do about it? I mean, first about the shouting match across the hall. I think, I mean, to be fair, if you look at in the parliament website, there are whole handset about the parliamentary debates. I mean, from our independence days. I mean, the first parliamentary parliament in 1959. You can read the whole debates in there. I think, I mean, to be fair, I mean, the shouting match maybe just about 10% of the whole debate in the parliament. There are a lot of issues brought up by MPs from different parties. I mean, the issues is whether we should ask whether parliament has become a formality. I mean, the minister doesn't really give attention about the voice that represent the rakyat at large. Okay, I think that's my short response for the COY.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Ivy. I'll proceed with Faisal. Yeah, you have comments on the.
Okay, on first question, for me, any intervention made by government just for the purpose of serving the public, taking care of the welfare of the people, I'm okay. But we should identify what kind of intervention made by the government in business sector that really wish to protect the welfare of the people, of the public. Because yes, the question is important because we should not let the government be part of the business to the extent of misusing the position. For example, like we have known the GLC award or GLC rewards, for example, misusing the people's money in the GLC for certain purpose. So that's the baseline. If you can prove that you intervene in the business sectors that really can protect the welfare of the people, so it is okay. Secondly, on social liberalism, yes, it is hard to find the just balance between two extremes. But I want to share the two, not principles lah, but the two things that we can see. First, when we talk about any regulations that want to be brought out by even government, first we need to look at the objective of the regulation, whether it is reasonable or not. If it is unreasonable, so we should not have that kind of regulation. The objective, or even in Islam, we have this kind of objective of Sharia, maqasid Sharia. The objective, I mean, to serve the people. It is good for the people, so it is okay. Secondly, accountability or responsibility. This comes after we can see the consequences of the liberalism or any any act by government that wish to de-gazette certain laws, for example. So in the aftermath of this kind of action, so we need to have people who really understand that they are responsible for liberalism or accountability for the effect after the liberalism. So these two things, I think, can be our guidelines how to be a balance between the left or the right. And also on the political liberalism, I think a lot need to be done, especially during the PH government. There were spaces, I think Wabi Amin Ahmad knows, he knows better lah. During the PH time, there were a lot of spaces that really they can do to reform or to bring the reform agenda on political liberalism. So we still keep fighting for it.
All right, thank you, Faisal. I think we can go like combine most of the questions more on the effects or drawbacks of the liberalism, I guess. So on economy, for example, the monopoly, how do we ensure that the problem of monopoly, and also on the rapid urbanization, because it can lead to inequality, and then globalization itself leads to, yes. So basically, yeah, what do you what can you comment on this, the backdrops of liberalism? Too much freedom is not the best. Okay. All right, so I'll pass again to Trisha. Yeah.
But before me, maybe Seng Keat, do you have any comments? Because we've kind of left him alone for a while. Seng Keat, I'll come back after this.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to give a very short kind of summary response, but not answer to particulars any of the question. I will start with this because I setuju dengan cadangan YB Amin lah, di mana kita sepatutnya mendemokratikkan konsep-konsep dan falsafah liberalism dengan falsafah lain dalam bahasa Melayu. Sebab sekarang ni macam benda ni banyak discuss dengan bahasa Inggeris atau ada banyak prasangka terhadap konsep falsafah ni, di mana mungkin NGO lain macam ABIM ke dengan think tank YB Amin tu mungkin boleh kita mempromosikan banyak wacana dalam konsep ni, di mana untuk menggalakkan lebih fahaman. So I just want to repeat in this English in a short while so that people understand. We will try to democratize the discussion about some of these philosophy concepts, liberalism and others in Bahasa Malaysia, which a lot more people can understand and engage in the discussion. If not, then will be concentrate dominant by the more conservative groups in the society. Because we go back to our survey, we have 3 pillars: socio-economic and politics. On the political front, everyone welcome the concept of liberalism. People welcome competition. People want elections. But come to the economic one, 50-50. Maybe because we are so well protected in the last 60 years, so people are like, okay, the government will take care of us. So in our daily conversation, kerajaan akan ambil berat. Kerajaan akan jaga kita. So even some of these, I screen through some of these comment questions. We also have this kind of mentality. We always question why government don't do that, why government don't do this. Actually, the question for me is how can the CSO, civil society, like ideas and some of the think tank can chip in or step in to promote some of these concepts so that we have a better understanding and so that we will have less, because we are now in the middle of this identity politics where we were controversial on the social liberalism part. People will say, oh, Islam is under threat, Islam terancam, Melayu terancam. So we fall into the identity politics traps when we discuss so much on the social liberalism. So maybe why not we focus on the economics liberalism, which Trisha talked a lot, and ideas have a lot of policy paper on this. How is it the open markets, or is how much the government GLC distorted our market? And is it the reason why the foreign company not coming here because of our distorted market? So much of protection, so much subsidies and stuff like that. We need to discuss a lot more this. I believe in solving the economic problem, the identity politics will be less kind of contentious issue in the long run. So this is kind of my short response on this. So I expect those people on listening to this conversation, if you think you want to volunteer, you can I think can start with ideas or start with different think tank, ABIM, to try to have more this kind of put in our efforts rather than expecting the big government will take care of everything for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Seng Keat. I'll just respond to what you've just said about the economic liberalism one. So actually somebody was asking in the chat box, which I've already answered, about the privatization of healthcare and essential services in the US, which didn't necessarily lead to a good outcome because of monopolization of government. So let me just say that at the outset, absolutely, we should be very careful about companies that behave like monopolies or oligopolies, because they have the potential of basically, like the name says, monopolizing the market. And they also have a great potential and power to influence governments to make decisions on their behalf, right? So you do see that a lot in the US. And we need to be careful about that happening in other countries, including here. So I would say that that's not the kind of healthy competition that we want. We do not want to necessarily support big companies that have monopolies and can, what we call, have state capture. So you capture the state and you influence the decisions of the government. So we recognize that there's a difference between companies that operate that way and well-serving companies like the SMEs, and most of the business actually in Malaysia is made up of small and medium or even micro enterprises, right? So those are the kinds of enterprises that we want to promote, and we want them to survive, we want them to thrive. So another note is that I think privatization is not necessarily the culprit. I think there are cases of good privatization methods that are done and done properly through good governance and accountability practices. The problem in Malaysia is that we haven't seen a very good series of examples of privatization. The reason why we are so negative about privatization is because in Malaysia, what we've done is we have privatized a lot of public assets, but to the cronies, right? So when you do that and they don't have the expertise to run the companies properly, then of course we are clouded by this negative perception that every form of privatization is wrong. But there are, very good case studies. I've been to the UK, I've been to other countries where I've seen how some of their services are actually privatized. They don't privatize in big lump sum, and they don't give them like 20-30 concession, 20-30 year concessions. That's ridiculous, right? That's what happens in Malaysia. But what you can do is and this is where the government plays an important role, because government as a regulator, government knows what they want. So they actually privatize in bite sizes. So you privatize like chunks, like small chunks out. And then the point here is that if they can actually serve better, more efficiently, then it works. If it's not efficient, then there's no point in privatizing it in the first place. And then back to what Seng Keat was saying about the economic side. I think what's happened here is that we have actually heard from very Bumiputra companies, by the way, right? Like Bumiputra, very well meaning, very honest Bumiputra companies that are unable to compete in market because the GLC comes in and takes over the share of the business. So this is a problem, which means that even the Bumiputra companies themselves, the SMEs, they want to thrive, they want to compete well, but sometimes the opportunities are not given to them. So I think that's my response for now. There are quite a lot of questions, and actually we are coming close to noon already, so I'm not sure how else I will try to type out whatever answers I have, but I think I want to leave the time for the other panelists.
Yeah, thank you, Trisha. I'll pass to YB Amin and also Faisal.
Okay, I'll try to answer 3 questions. I think one posted by Jordan Tan on the blanket license, and one from Halmi on the decline of liberalism, and one by Norman on the aspect of media. First, no, we are not talking about blanket license. I mean, of course, as I mentioned just now, I mean, throughout history, people talk about freedom, and at the same time, people also talk about, justice. So, I mean, we need an open environment so that people can communicate, set their own boundaries from time to time. So, I mean, whether we will have, good degrees of freedom, it depends on how people adjust, their openness. So, I mean, we have trained people to live in an open society and appreciate the differences that we have, regardless, whether it's about race or religious or about the economy and other things. On the decline of liberalism, I tend to agree with Halmi. But if you look, from late 90s especially, there's a research, I think, mentioned by Professor Larry Diamond. I think he's the man in democracy and in a democratic research around the world. So he mentioned about the decline of democracy since, the trend of deficit democracy since late 90s, even until now. And I think that also led to somehow related to the decline of liberalism in many aspects of life. My take is the decline happened because people expecting that democracy should deliver. Democracy should enrich their life, should bring a better, good quality of life. But unfortunately, in many countries, including Malaysia, people are yet to to enjoy the fruits of democracy. So when we talk about democracy, people talk, mostly negative about politicians, and it's not just happening in Malaysia, but around the world. I think partly because when people felt that they have been neglected, they demand more on more illiberalism policies. They demand it. They don't trust politicians, but they want politicians to do more. And it is contradicting. I think partly, of course, politicians mostly enjoy I mean, when people wanting them to do more, although they don't have any ideas about what they should do. So this is the room where I mean, all the liberals proponents should I mean, take the opportunity to explain how I mean the increase of I mean more roles from the government will not help. I mean, to ease the tension. Or more government intervention cannot achieve that objective. I mean, to increase the quality of life of the viewer. But this is not easy. I mean, coming from a politicians, because politician, I mean, comes to election, of course, they wanted to be popular, and they want the votes. So it's very hard for politicians to find the right messaging to say to the people that you don't need me, you don't need us more. Because that's why I say, I mean, in terms of language, I mean, we should educate the population, the people that, I mean, there's a way of that politician can help us, but not by doing more intervention, but I mean, should should menahan diri lah daripada melakukan wrong intervention lah. Okay. On the media, I mean, Norman mentioned about the media. I agree. I think there's a need for training for media, sebab ramai, I don't think, in fact, among politicians pun tak ramai orang yang menguasai isu-isu ekonomi, because it is sometimes complicated. And I'm not sure lah. This is not an attack to the media, but I tak pasti berapa ramai jurnalis ataupun wartawan yang menguasai isu ekonomi. So of course, I mean, when they are reporting about economic issues in the country, they will, I mean, mostly take the popular views among the public, and because they, I mean, maybe lack of exposure, they cannot frame the economic discourse in a more balanced ways, so that public can see how certain policies and economics will affect their life. So maybe, I don't know, maybe I just will take up this challenge, I mean, to do like a training for media practitioners and how to report on economic issues. I know that my experience in German, I mean, they call, I mean, they give a scholarship for the media practitioners, journalists, and to go for the trainings on how they can play a role to report on not just on economic liberalism, but of course on liberalism at large. So maybe, I don't know, sebab kita masa tak banyak. Kalau if I may wrap up my arguments, I rasa macam I mentioned just now, kita sekarang ni bukan hanya Malaysia, tetapi seluruh dunia kita berada dalam situasi transisi. Partly because transisi ni berlaku kerana kita sekarang ni perkembangan teknologi lah, yang pertama. Yang kedua, demographic change. Hari ini kita semakin ramai orang muda yang menjadi pengundi. Mereka ni adalah bagi generasi muda ni, teknologi maklumat adalah macam ABC lah for them. Meaning the basic knowledge that they must kuasai. Jadi memang perubahan polisi diperlukan, and it is always challenging. So bagi orang-orang yang percaya kepada ideologi liberalisme, dan tak kisahlah ideologi lain pun sekalipun, they have to identify low hanging fruits. Kan, kata apa, sebab kalau kita bercakap tentang perkara-perkara yang terlalu rumit, walaupun perlu, tapi mungkin yang rumit-rumit ni mungkin hanya perlu didiscuss ataupun dibincangkan di peringkat yang lain. Tetapi untuk open discourse, we have to identify low hanging fruits yang if possible directly impact people's life lah. Macam tadi soalan macam mana dia boleh meningkatkan gaji, macam mana dia macam like my earlier writings I wrote about football. I mean, really, I don't think like proponents of liberalism want to talk about it, but in football, I mean, there are like certain values that we can embrace. Macam footballs, I mean, role of the government should be like a referee, They are not
I'm
the
sorry,
players.
YB, because of the time, can you wrap it up in maybe 1 minute?
Basically,
Yes. Thank you.
it's important to identify low-hanging fruits and work on it lah. And sometimes by having this kind of understanding, like kawan-kawan yang lain pun understand lah, there are like certain issues that kita pilih tu bukan too silent lah, but kita tidak mau highlight sangat because I don't think kita it is beneficial. I mean to discuss macam kalau di Malaysia ni banyak sometimes isu-isu agama dan kaum ni kadang sensitif, so we have to frame it rightly so that isu tu tidak merugikan untuk kita bercakap tentang liberalisme dalam konteks yang lebih luas.
Right, thank you again, YB. So I think for the final question to wrap up 1 to 2 minutes comment, what are the main principles of liberalism and what are actually the rules of government in it? Yeah. So I pass to Trisha and then Faisal.
Thank you, Salsabila. Terima kasih, YB Amin as well. So the final question you're asking is what is the main principle of liberalism and what's the role of government, right? I would say that going back to the premise of liberalism, which is individual liberty. So I know that sometimes there's a misconception that individual liberty means that we only do things for ourselves and we don't think about our families, we don't think about communities. And, you know, Asia actually is a very collective community type place, right? I mean, we have a really strong emphasis on our families. And I mean, I'm no exception to that. But I think when we talk about individual liberty, we just want to express that we actually have the ability to think for ourselves and to make decisions for ourselves, so rational decisions for ourselves. I know I sound repetitive, but I think that really is the basic premise. Of course, there are other principles related to liberalism, including, you know, sort of where government doesn't have like a full say in everything that we do in our lives, so a little bit more of a limited government in that sense. We also have to have the rule of law, right? So this is actually partially answering the second question on the role of government. So the role of government is to provide the rule of law, in which everybody is applied to the law equally. So there's nobody who's above the law, you know, tak ada macam dua darjat kind of a situation. If everybody has to comply with PKP, MCO, everybody complies with it. There's really nobody above the law, not even politicians or anyone at all within the country. So equal application before the law. I think that's really, really important. I think there was a question just now, and I think I will just end there. What is the role of government and governance, right? So the government plays a huge role, right? So the government still needs to be there. And I think the concept of government serving the people, that should come up as a priority. And when they think about that, like I said earlier, government really is about people anyway. They are the people. So we shouldn't have this like separation so much. They play a role in ensuring that there's public participation. So how can the public participate and contribute positively in a valuable, productive way to the country? If they can see that there's actually no divide, then it means that government will take in input from all sides, take in input from citizens, from civil society, from think tanks, from organizations like ABIM and other religious organizations. So this is where they can play a role also in the way that we do budgets, right? Like how much money is being spent on the people? We should have a say. Do we know how much is actually being implemented? So that's all the monitoring that can take place. And of course, lastly, government should provide information to the people about making sure that there's transparency and accountability. So I think we're not saying that government plays no role in people's lives, but government plays a role, and we just have to shift the mindset a little bit, right? Government is not just giving us handouts, but they are serving us through information, allowing us to participate in the collective decision-making process. And finally, I think being able to recognize that every individual, including the small and medium enterprises, they have a huge functional role to play in making sure that we live like prosperous and harmonious lives. So I think that would be the ultimate goal of any kind of, you know, philosophy of liberalism. When you put it in practice, it's about how can individuals live in society including multi-ethnic, multi-religious societies like ours in a prosperous and harmonious way. That would be the ultimate end goal. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Trisha. I now pass to Faisal.
Okay, thank you. I would like to share a survey by Civic Space into 2020 when we talk about this kind of identity politics happening around the world or across the globe, where yes, of course, identity politics derive from the issue of economic problem. Now everybody feels the pinch. Every citizen suffered, especially due to COVID-19 pandemic and so on. So because of these economic issues or economic problems that we face, so everybody feels that they don't want to share the big chunk of economic with the rest. So that's why even before we have Brexit and the anti-refugees, anti-migrant sentiments, because they don't want to share the economic prosperity with the rest instead of but monopolizing within one group of people. And but unfortunately, the government, when education asks about the role of the government, the government across the globe generally they tend to aggravate this matter. Show to the public that they are championing the majority and so on, instead of alleviating the fears. For example, like Tisha said, decentralizing the so-called the system of monopolizing the economy, because at the end of the day, the basic issue that we are facing now, the distribution of economy, happens due to monopolizing of economic by certain quarters of people, not because you share with the rest of our economic prosperity and so on. So the government need to stand up to play very important role instead of aggravating the sentiments, but government across the globe need to alleviate the fears by looking down at the practical ways how to find a solution and to decentralize this kind of the structure of monopolizing the economy, so that we can see liberal economy as a positive thing or as a positive side, instead of now people tarnishing the liberal economic as something that as I said, imposing something, imposing you to share the economic prosperity with the rest. That's it. Thank you Aidis, Tisha and Tasmila.
Thank you, Faisal. So maybe a bit of comment final from Tan Seng Keat. Yeah.
I think I don't have any specific comments. I just say that we will track this survey for the next 2 years until 2023. So whether there's whether the graph up or down, it depends on some of you, like the think tank, the NGO out there. And so that we will, then we can tell you, okay, there's improvement on understanding, the decline on understanding. We just measure what's the pulse of the society. So whether there's any change, I think a lot more depends on what's happening out there politically and also economically. So whether ideas, Abin and other, whether we can create something, our counter interventions, whether we can make our society more inclusive and at the same time more competitive, whether it's in politically or economically, so that we will have a better country. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tan Seng Keat. So I think final will be from YB Amin, a short commentary, maybe 1 to 2 minutes. Yeah. So
nothing much. I just would like to say congrats to Merdeka Centre and Ideas, and of course to the funders for the research. And I believe that this kind of research can serve as a good baseline for the proponents of liberalism and to strategize their advocacy approach, especially in Malaysia. And I hope that liberalism will thrive more in Malaysia. And I know it's hard. I was there, and I'm still trying very much to stick the principles as an MP. But I think the future is promising. Just that we have to be more adaptive to the local condition. Thank you.
Thank you, I mean, so I guess today's discussion is very interesting and a bit like we know a lot of new things. So I hope all the participants get the inputs that you guys want. And also for your questions, if can, maybe the speakers just can reply a type answer privately. I'll be very happy and thank you for that. So yeah, I think that's all for today. And also, if we have more webinar sessions, you are more than welcome to join us. And yeah, thank you. And for speakers, you need to stay a while after the event for a short debriefing from Ame. So thank you everyone again. Have a good day.